All right, everybody.
All right, guys. It's another episode of Your Boom is in the Shot. I'm TJ, and that's Ben.
Hello.
And we are back. This time, only 1 week after the last episode. We're not going to give you another big long hiatus because we don't have the same complications and roadblocks that we had before.
I don't know if I'd say roadblocks and complications.
But
I feel
we
like
didn't have access to the facilities.
Yeah, well,
we had a busy end of the semester. Or whatever. We explained it in the last episode.
Yes, we did. We mentioned it.
Right,
it. So
everything's good now.
Yes, everything is fine. We're back at it.
But because we took that long hiatus,
yes,
not to cut you off, Ben, that's why we have this bonus episode for you to fill in the gaps and try to give you guys some more content in a more consistent pace, but also to fill in what happened with our lives during that time when watching movie-wise.
It's our movies, our movie lives, what we saw over the break.
Our entertainment consumption that happened over our break.
So we're going to fill you in on what we watched over the break. I think I'm going to go ahead and start with one of my first things that I watched over break, Into the Spider-Verse. We talked about that last week, so you could just go ahead and go back on to last week to have some feelings about that.
Yeah, if you want to know our thoughts about that, go listen to the episode. There's no point in rehashing it now. And you'll get much more developed thoughts than us just skimming over it.
Absolutely. The next thing I saw after, well, actually I saw this before Spider-Man. Early in my break, I watched Mortal Engines, Peter Jackson movie. That was an experience. It wasn't good. It wasn't bad. I mean, the experience wasn't bad. The movie was bad. All right, so here's what I'm going to say about Mortal Engines. We're going to make this quick. If I were to give Mortal Engines a grade, it would be a C+. It passed. It didn't do well. I was entertained, but it wasn't it. I think that my big problem, I think the biggest problem that film suffered with is that it needed more time. All of the characters in that film either died or had their resolutions before I cared about them.
Yeah, the when you kind of gave me your complaints, because I haven't seen it, but it sounded like the gist of it was, it's like all the books packed into a single movie, and so they're trying to throw all of these different plot lines at you too much, too fast. It's like...
Yeah, and I haven't read all the books, so I don't know if it's all the books. It might just be the first one, but I do know that there are a lot of plot lines that... get wrapped up really quick, and a lot of characters that are kind of they're really cool characters, but I don't know anything about them, and they have these big fantastic conclusions, and they didn't have any development for me to care about them. And I think that was really tragic, because there are some things that this film really has going for it. I think barring the writing and the sad fact of the characters, it is one of the prettiest movies that I have watched in a long time. And I don't mean pretty like, it wasn't beautiful vistas or anything like that, but it was the art department and the design that went into this film were phenomenal. I mean, I'm already a big fan of science fiction. I'm already a big fan of all aesthetics in science fiction. I hate to call it steampunk, but it is kind of steampunk in a way. And I have to say, the vehicles, the cities, the design on the characters, the weapons, the costumes, they were so meticulously done. And it's what I've come to expect from Peter Jackson and What a Workshop and that whole crew, just like what we saw with the Lord of the Rings films back in the day. There was significantly more CG, but, that's the day we live in. That's what Peter Jackson does nowadays. But it was disappointing, because they really could have had something great. I think they threw it away on only having this one film that had so much crammed into it. I made a joke after we watched it that it felt like Peter Jackson came to the studio with his pitch, and they were like, you can only have one movie. You can do it, but you can only have one movie. And that was really disappointing, because I think it would have benefited from 2 or 3 movies. I think that would have been enough to make it what it needed to be. Excuse me. The other thing...
Ben over here eating and being nasty.
Yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry, guys. I have a massive headache, and I'm just trying to mitigate it as best I can. I think it's really dry and my sinuses are getting a little clogged up. But I digress. I think that it really suffered from that, that not having enough time to really develop. But I think it did have potential, and it could have been something really interesting. And I will stand by that. I think it had some really incredible art, and I would see it just for that reason. So that's what I have to tell you guys. Don't go see it because you think it's going to be a great movie, but I would go see it if only because it was really pretty. It was really a feat of artistry in that sense.
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting movie, I guess. I mean, I'm not super into steampunk stuff, but I also don't dislike it. I could explore it just for the sake of it. I like Peter Jackson's direction generally.
Yeah, I think that Peter Jackson recently has suffered from trying to make movies too large of scale. I think that Lord of the Rings had it kind of well. They kind of had it big long movies, but they didn't suffer. The story didn't suffer. And I think that with the ability to make big battle scenes, which was something that was really well received in Lord of the Rings, he's kind of gone too far in that direction. The Hobbit had that issue where there was like the Battle of Five Armies was just a 3-hour movie of fighting, and it wasn't well received because of that. And as fun as the fighting was to watch one time, it doesn't really hold up. And Mortal Engines kind of has that issue too. It's really bombastic. It's really action packed, and there are a lot of one-liners. If you're a fan of action movies with cheesy one-liners, go watch Mortal Engines. You're gonna love it. But it was an interesting experience. And I will say, after I watched it, I saw a trailer that said, "Why did?" Or not a trailer. It was like an article on the internet. And it was like "Why did?" Mortal Engines fail, and I clicked on it to see what it said, and it said steampunk, because of steampunk. And then there was a whole article that I apparently had to pay a subscription to read, but yeah, that little quote was kind of interesting, because steampunk isn't really popular. It's not really a popular sub category of like science fiction, and or any of the like dash punks. Like cyberpunk is really glamorous and really in right now. But steampunk's never really been in. It's always kind of been like a fringe thing. And I think it's a really problematic aesthetic. I think that's a talk for a different episode. Yeah. But for now, that's what I'm going to leave you guys with Mortal Engines. It was interesting experience. It wasn't great. It was not a great movie, but it was really, really pretty, really fun to watch. And I give a lot of respect to the art department on that film. And that's something that I really care about is art, models, costumes, and concept art, all that stuff. And I think they hit the nail on the head in that aspect on that movie, if nothing else.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, you want to go on to the next movie?
Awesome, man. Yeah. I'll see. I'll name something else. So I just saw Annihilation finally. I know I'm a little late to that party.
I still haven't seen it, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, okay. Well, so I won't spoil it for you, but it's from the director of Ex Machina, which is a movie that I love. It's one of my favorite sci-fi movies, and he's a very talented director. His name's escaping me right now, but he's great. Obviously, whoever cinematographer he's been working with, I think it's the same one on this one as Ex Machina 2. Really great compositions, beautiful shots, and the movie is weird in a charming way.
Garland?
All right, Alex Garland, yeah, that's it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the director. And it stars Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaac. And Oscar Isaac is like an incredible talent, and I think he's kind of becoming a mainstay for Alex Garland because he stars in Ex Machina as well.
Right.
And he's great in it, though he doesn't have a lot of screen time. Natalie Portman is really, really good in this movie as well.
She's really good in most movies she's in.
Yeah, she's a great actress. I was never super sold on her until I saw Black Swan. But then once I saw that, I was like, oh, because I just grew up seeing her in like the prequels.
Star Wars prequels. I think she kind of got screwed like every actor in that series.
Yeah,
it was so poorly written that didn't matter how great of an actor.
Every actor except Sam Jackson and Ewan McGregor.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's pretty much true. They all kind of got a
even
poor
Hayden Christensen.
there.
He's not a good actor though.
Well, that's true, but
Not as good as Natalie Portman, but
no,
she's great in this movie. But it's a really weird movie. It has some really heady sci-fi concepts. Basically, this is like you find this out in the first like I don't know 10 minutes of the movie, so it's not really a spoiler. But basically, this like meteor or something hits Earth, and it lands on this lighthouse on this coast. And then you find out that like it's like a year later, sometime a little bit time later, that it's created this environment of like this blob that keeps like expanding, and like it's expanding presumably endlessly, and it's going to eventually one day consume the whole Earth. And it's only expanded like a number of miles, I guess. But there's like the government's keeping an eye on it, and they're sending in soldiers and everything, and no one's ever coming back. Everyone who goes in, they never come back.
Yeah.
And so Natalie Portman and her team, they go in and they start they're exploring, and like there's her and a bunch of soldiers, and she's in the army now. She's a professor at Johns Hopkins, her character.
Right.
So she's like brainy but also brawny, and it's kind of a little generic, but like she plays it with enough like believability that you don't get bothered by it. But they go in and they start hinting at this thing, like they see these flowers that are like on the same vine, but they're clearly different species, and it doesn't really make any sense. And she's a biologist, so she kind of like picks up on the stuff. It's like, this is weird. And then they get like ambushed by this like crocodile, but it's white and it has like shark teeth, and they're like, what's going on? And they realize that there's some kind of like like DNA
splicing going on.
Yeah, kind of stuff. It's reorganizing the DNA of the living creatures that are in it.
Right.
They find this tape from the previous party that went in. Like, they cut open the guy's stomach, and his intestines were like moving around inside like big snakes and stuff like that. And so like all this crazy stuff is happening in there. And then there's this bear that like attacks him. That's like part bear, part like hyena or something. And when it opens its mouth, it can imitate the voice of a person screaming for help.
Oh my!
Of like the person that it killed a little while earlier. So it's like it's crazy, and it's really intense, and there's a lot of really great suspense. And there's not really character development, but there's character interactions that are
it's like a horror movie, right?
No, it's not really a horror movie. It's like action thriller, but there's some horror elements to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's unique, but it's weird. And then at the end, it just gets really bizarre and nothing makes sense anymore. Or I'm just too dumb to get it. Either way, but the end is just super.
You're a smart guy, so I wouldn't assume that.
It's just it left me, and I just saw it like the other night. I didn't get the ending of it at all,
right.
Or like what they were trying to do with it. So I wouldn't fall super positive on the movie, but there are things that I can compliment about it that I have, like the shots and the acting, and some of like the concepts. But I don't think like it's almost like oh, check out this crazy sci-fi premise. That's it. Like there's no purpose toward it,
right?
So yeah, Annihilation.
All right. Well, then I'll keep it moving right along. I saw Mary Poppins Returns over the break.
Oh yeah, I want to see that. How was that?
So I loved it.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was gonna like it. I didn't. I wasn't a huge fan of the original Mary Poppins. I'm not a big musical person. And I went in fully expecting it to just be terrible. And I found it really enjoyable. It was cute. It was it played up that Victorian England thing, but I mean the songs were, how do I put this? You know what? I'm going to say this. A lot of musical movies nowadays have been leaning heavy into the usage of like pop music and like pop singers, in their musical numbers, and this film didn't do that. It felt like I was watching a real classic musical. It was classical style. Like singing and numbers, and it was fun. It was really fun. The one thing that I couldn't get out of my head watching this is that we're both like sci-fi fantasy guys. I don't know how much you know about the premise of Mary Poppins, but she's like a nanny who comes from the sky and has got weird magical powers. The whole time I was watching this movie, all I could think of is that like Mary Poppins is some weird omniscient god, and like all of these people who like know who she is are like her weird followers, and like because like this is kind of like a weird take, but like so there's these guys that like one of the main characters, his name is Jack. He's a Leary, so he's one of the guys that goes around the city and lights and extinguishes all of the gas street lights. And he was in the original Mary Poppins, or at least his character was in the original Mary Poppins as the apprentice to the chimney sweep who would look up and see, and he would wave to.
This takes place like 25 or 30 years later. Or something, right?
So it's the kids,
it's the kids
from the
of
original.
The kids.
Yes, it's the kids of the kids. So the young boy and his sister. The boy has grown up and inherited this big house. His wife has died, and now he's taking care of his 3 kids alone. His sister is a union organizer.
So it's in the 40s then, right? Because the original was in like the 10s or the teens.
It's still like pre
World War II,
pre World War One, I think.
Oh, really?
There are cars, but I think the old one predated cars. I think the old one was like 1880s, 1890s.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a long time, so I was thinking it was like the 1910s or something.
Well, there's electricity and there are cars, but there's also gaslight, and there aren't a lot of cars. Most people are getting around by bicycle. I don't know. It seemed very
either way. I mean, just that's a slight
It
tangent.
seemed like really pre World War One to me, just based on the technology that they were in the clothing that they were using. And it's sometime during the Great Slump, so I'm assuming that's referring to the economic slump before World War One. So, that's where I've gotten my sort of inkling. But the premise is basically that the son can't afford to pay. He took a loan out on their house and he can't afford to pay it back. And the bank has come and basically said, you have 1 week to come up with our money or we're going to evict you. And he was like, oh, well, my wife was handling the finances, so when she died, I didn't realize that there were still payments on the loan and all this other stuff. And he's an artist, so he doesn't make enough money to pay for the house. And so this is happening, and Mary Poppins shows up to take care of his rambunctious kids and make them all prim and proper. And then a bunch of, kind of a sweet little story unfolds. And
how is Emily Blunt? I've heard a lot of great things.
She's phenomenal. She did a great job. I think that all of the acting in that film was really good. From every single one of them. Oh, I'm on a tangent though, because I was talking about the Learys. So
right, and
that's how we got talking about what time period the movie was in.
Yeah.
So the Leary Jack, who's like one of the main, he's kind of like the chimney sweep from the original movie. He is he knows about Mary Poppins. Like when Mary Poppins shows up, he's like, oh, as I live and breathe, if it isn't Mary Poppins. And like when Mary Poppins shows up at the house, they remember who she is, but they don't remember all of the magical things that she can do. And Jack, the Leary, says to one of the kids at one point, he's like, oh, one thing you have to know about Mary Poppins is they never remember. Because when you become an adult, you don't remember all of the magical things that Mary Poppins can do anymore. But she doesn't age, and she comes from the sky, and she can do all kinds of magical things. So my point is that for whatever reason, Jack can remember Mary Poppins and knows that she's weird and magical. And nobody else can in the entire film. And it's almost like Jack and the other Learys, because there's a big Leary musical number with all of the Learys in the city. It's almost like they're all like weird worshippers of Mary Poppins. Like they all know about Mary Poppins, and they're all like kind of these whimsical vagabond type characters who they know their way around the city, and they have little secret doorways and mystical passageways, because that's like a thing that happens. There's like a secret Mary Poppins Leary tunnel where they do a big magical dancing, singing number about what it's like to be a Leary. But so yeah, the whole time I was watching the movie, I was just thinking, oh, it's like a cult, and Mary Poppins is like a weird like god who like shows up and bestows like blessings upon her like worshippers.
You would take it there.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just what it felt like. It felt like that to me when I was watching the film, and I thought that was kind of like a funny little conspiracy type thing going on. But that aside, I did think it was really enjoyable. I thought the acting was really good. The songs, I don't really remember most of them, but that's not my kind of music. I still prefer it to the pop music in musicals nowadays,
like a La La Land type of thing.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of that. And especially when you look at like the animated stuff, like one of the reasons why I think Coco was so good is because Coco didn't have a lot of that pop music. Like Frozen was like the first kind of animated film to do it. They were like, oh, all of our numbers are like big pop musician numbers, and everybody was like, oh my god, our minds are blown. And then every single animated film that came out after that, that was just like what you do, and a lot of them suffered for it, I think.
I mean, a lot of musicals back in the heyday of musicals weren't like, a lot of the songs were like songs that were popular at the time already, right? Songs that were the equivalent of pop songs back then.
In a lot of ways, but there was still an element of like classical singing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a more traditional method of singing. And when you look at like the musicals from like the 90s, like look at all of the big Disney animations from the 90s that were really popular, like Hercules, for instance. All of the singing numbers in Hercules, none of them are particularly poppy. You know, some of them have their own kind of modern twist on it, but it's all really
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah, even Nightmare Before Christmas. Like that's
very
not pop
operatic.
Music. Yes,
very like
exactly.
Baroque.
Exactly, and that's something that I feel like Mary Poppins kind of called back to. So in that regard, I really liked it. I think it was really clean. I didn't notice any like issues with it. Like there weren't any clear plot holes that I remember. It was a tidy little story. It was heartwarming. I found myself smiling through the whole thing, which I don't normally do at movies like that. I'm not a big like, family.
I'm a film grump. I'm Ben.
I'm not a film grump, but
I'm cranky and I hate most things.
No,
just kidding.
No, not at all, not at all. But I did it. I expected to think that this was another. I'm jaded. I think if anything, I'm jaded, and I was expecting this movie to just be like a, Disney's remaking a lot of the old classics right now. Nostalgia is in. It's always in, but right now it's raking in the big dough, and that's what I was expecting this movie to be. But I think it did justice to the original Mary Poppins. So there was also a big sequence in the middle of the film for a while that was animated. And it was animated in a really classical animation style.
Like Disney style?
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because they did that whole like live action characters in an 3D environment. But they also had it had that like old school animation style to it. Like I don't know what am I. Did you ever watch Over the Garden Wall?
No.
The cartoon? Well, they in that movie or show, they do a lot of callbacks to like the 1960s and earlier animation. And I feel like this sequence kind of did that too. Like there's a big bad wolf character and his eyes do that thing where it's like the circles. You know what I'm talking about? When he's like angry and he's got the circles growing out of his pupils. They did that, and it was like that sort of stuff. So
like Looney Tunesy.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like that. And I think it was really well done and really well put together. So I was really and yeah, it was like old school Disney kind of animation. They had the horse, the old school, like the Disney famous horse. There was one of those in the film. So I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but if you look at the horses from like even the newer Disney movies, like Tangled, there's a horse, and Mulan, there's a horse, and like they all kind of look similar. They're all kind of like the same kind of, but they all have a lot of character. There was one of those in Mary Poppins, which I thought was kind of interesting. It didn't have a lot of screen time, but it was there. So anyway, yeah, long story short, I thought Mary Poppins was definitely a good watch, and I recommend it to anybody out there who hasn't seen it.
Especially because Dick Van Dyke doesn't look like he's aged between the movies, because he was like playing an older guy in the original anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
That's valid.
That was one of the things, like, when that movie was, like, coming out, the people were like, Dick Van Dyke has, like, found the fountain of youth, because...
Oh, yeah.
he looks the same, except now he's actually old.
Yeah, I will say I wish... I think Mary Poppins is good enough to have its own episode. Mm-hmm. I think if we had both seen it, we could probably talk at length about it. There were a lot of really clever things in that movie. But... The short of it is that I thought it was pretty good, and I recommend you guys go see it.
I'm probably going to see it eventually, whenever I can.
Well, if you guys are interested in the Mary Poppins bonus episode, let us know, and we might throw one of those out there at some point in the future.
Email us at yourboomisinintheshot@gmail.com.
Yeah, we'll also...
Not .gmail.com.
We'll also check out... comments on the video, but we definitely are more likely to respond to an email, so keep that in mind. Yes. Oh, I also want to point out there's a A lot of the actors from Mary Poppins were also in Into the Woods, and I don't know if it was directed by the same people, but my girlfriend is a big fan of Into the Woods, which is a Brothers Grimm animation, or not animation, musical. I watched it very recently, was not a big fan of it, but like Meryl Streep was in it. Meryl Streep's in both films, as far as I understand, and yeah, and so was Emily Blunt, and so that was kind of an interesting little connection there. I don't know.
Okay.
I just figure like throwing that in there because I was just thinking about it.
So another movie I saw, that's another like not new movie, but kind of new, is the Belko Experiment. Have you seen that?
Which one is that?
It's written by James Gunn, but directed by somebody else, another name that's eluding me. But it's written by James Gunn, and it's a pretty good premise and a pretty interesting script. Basically, the concept of this movie is as soon as I tell you the concept, you'll probably have some kind of like recollection of what it was, because it was advertised quite a bit when it was coming out, which it was in theaters probably like a year and a half ago or something.
Okay.
And so it's this thriller / horror movie. The premise is that there's this big office building in Colombia, and it has like employees from around the world. And one day they show up to work, and like all the Colombian nationals are like being turned away and sent home, and like there's all this militia that's like surrounding this big ass corporate building that's like away from all the major like cities and civilization.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, this is really weird. Why is there like all this military presence today? But everyone kind of just brushes it off and doesn't think anything of it. And then there's like this voice comes over the loudspeakers of the whole building and is like, you guys have 2 hours. I think it's like you have 2 hours to kill 2 people, I think, of you, or there will be consequences. And they're like, who's pulling a prank? So they're like going to check like the intercom, and no one's there, and they're like, what's going on? And so then they're like, all right, let's just leave. And they go to walk out of the entrance, and like metal shuts, and like it goes up all the windows through the whole building, and it's like all the walls are steel, and it's like everything's they're trapped in this building and they cannot leave.
Right.
And then the 2 hours are up, and like everyone's kind of like starting to panic, like what's going on? Well, then all of a sudden, like they're like, oh, consequences have happened, and like somebody's head like explodes, and then another person like it looks like people are getting shot in like the head, and people are running and they're scrambling like, look out, and they find out that like they're like, okay, so now we will give you further instructions, but now you see consequences have happened. Yeah. So I think it was 4 people.
Right.
Died.
It was kill 2 or 4 die.
Yeah. So so they think, oh, people are being shot, and they realize what happened was that their heads are exploding from the inside because they had these trackers that were put in them when they started working there for their own safety, because they're in Colombia, but they're actually bombs. And so everyone's like, this is in our own head. So one character's like, he goes to cut it out, and they're like, you have 10 seconds to stop what you're doing, or we will detonate it. And he gets like down to like 2 seconds, and he's like, he can't get it out of his head, and he stops. And so then they're like, okay, so now you have, I think it's like 2 hours again or something. So you have 2 hours to for half of you to be dead. If half of you are not dead at the end of these 2 hours,
we'll kill all of you, right?
Yeah, we'll kill like, it's like there's 70 of you in this building. If 30 of you are not dead, we'll kill 60 of you. And so they all kind of go into a panic, and they're like, what should we do? So then like, there's just all these conflicts, and like the guy who's like the corporate, he's like the head of the company in the building, is like the main manager. He like is like, well, I think I should have control of the guns so nothing happens. Well, he's actually kind of like fucked up, right? And he like he kind of gathers this little group of guys who like, they're like, well, I can't die, I need to go home to my family. And so they get the guns, and then they decide, okay, so here's how we're gonna do it. So we could do a raffle. We could pick out the oldest, the people who don't have kids, and so they start separating people. And then they're just like, they line up like everybody over 60 get in this line, and they just start popping them. And it's just like, so not to keep spoiling it, but like it just becomes this total pandemonium. And then what happens is they get one person away from like the 60, or from the 30, they get 29 people, and then the time runs out.
Oh,
and then
no.
the 60, like the heads are just exploding. It's
Oh, no.
yeah, and so then it gets down to like the last 3 people, and they're like, whoever has the most kills when the time runs out will be the one who's left alive, and everyone else will be killed if they're not already.
Oh my
and
God.
it just goes like it's crazy, but like a lot of the character like kind of like, I don't want to say character like drama necessarily, because it's like this is crazy premise, but like a lot of the conflict and like stress of the situation, like you can really feel it, and like the way that a lot of these moments happen, you like putting yourself in this scenario, like what would I do? Would I start killing people to protect myself? Like how, like I'd be terrified, like I'd be worried that my head's gonna explode or whatever. I'd be killed by this guy or whatever, And so it was a really interesting movie, and I personally really enjoyed it. And it has a really satisfying ending, which I won't spoil, but like,
oh, come on. All right,
actually,
everybody cover your ears right now. I want to hear what the spoiler
fine.
ending is.
So fine. So there's this one character, the character who tried to cut it out of the back of his neck. He's like the good guy the whole movie. He's like, there's this girl that he's in love with there who like he tries to keep her alive till the end, but she ends up bleeding out because she gets shot by that corporate guy. So it comes down to the corporate guy and that guy who's like the everyman. So that's kind of where it gets generic, but he doesn't have any kills, because the whole movie he's like, I won't kill anybody. He's like there's got to be another solution to this. Like we can't just end human life. And so but the corporate guy's like, I don't care. I'll do whatever it takes, whatever means necessary. And he's racked up like dozens of kills. He's just been shooting people left and right. And so they get into this epic fight, like just knockdown, drag out fight, and he ends up like in self-defense. The guy who didn't want to kill anybody, he takes a roll of like a tape roll, like one of those desk ones, like those black ones, and he just bashes the corporate guy's like face in with it. And then the lights turn back on in the place, and the voice is like, congratulations,
you have the most kills.
You have the most kills, and you're the sole survivor. Everyone else is dead. And so the military comes in, and they bring him out to this little hut that they set up outside the building. And this guy is like, so he's like asking him questions about his experience. He's like, I'm a sociologist, and like and he's like, we've been doing this experiment and everything. And he's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Well, so there's this thing that's set up earlier where they were trying to figure out how to get through the steel to blast their way out, because they couldn't. The people who like the maintenance guys were taking a blowtorch to it. It wouldn't burn. It wasn't even hot. And so the one guy's concept was like, so he was going around to dead people and like taking people who had been killed not by the bomb, killed by like a bullet or something, and he was digging the bombs out of their brains and stuff, and collecting them. And he was going to either use them as weapons or try to blast open the steel if he could. Well, so he's talking to the guys, and so he just jumps up and lunges at this guy and like and attaches the bomb to him. And then like he's like, what are you doing? Like, you can blow me up, but like it's all these military guys are just gonna take you out. He's like, are you sure? Because as they dragged him out, they cut back and he put the bombs on them as well and stuck them onto him. And so he just goes over to the switch. They had a switcher where they were just switching names and detonating the bombs, and he just flicks them all off, and then they all just like die.
And everybody explodes.
And then he goes to the camera, and he's like, hey. He's like, you sick fucks or whatever. And then it pulls out from the camera, and then there's like 5 other, and then like 10 other, and then like 100 other like people.
Oh, doing like in the same situation.
In a similar situation. And then like it just fades.
That's weird. Yeah. That's fucked up.
Yeah.
Damn. I kind of want to watch this now.
The Belko Experiment.
I'm not a big fan of films like that. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. I mean, I don't know. It's probably not something I would watch unless I had like I was talking earlier. It's not something I would watch unless I had the spoiler for it. But that's really interesting. That's a really interesting concept. Would you recommend it?
Yeah, definitely. I would totally recommend it. It's on. I saw it on HBO Go. I don't know if you have.
All right, I have access to HBO.
Yeah, it's good. Definitely recommend.
Yeah. Oh wow, awesome. I'll have to check that out. All right, so I'll go to another film that I watched. This is not a new film by any means. In fact, most of you have probably already seen it, and if you haven't, you should go out and see it, because what are you waiting for? But I watched Labyrinth over the break, starring David Bowie. And, I talk about fantasy and science fiction a lot. That is, to me, like the quintessential like fantasy movie. I think it is very crucially important to special effects and fantasy storytelling, and without it, I don't think we would have movies like Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or what have you. So to keep it quick, because I know most of you have probably seen it already. It's a really, really good, really classic film about a young girl who didn't appreciate what she had until it was gone, and
Played by I forget her name, but she ended up becoming a huge actress later on as she got older.
I'm not good with names, but
she's Betty Ross in the Ang Lee Hulk movie.
Really?
Yeah, I can't. But she's like 15 in that movie. It was like one of her first major roles.
Sarah Williams? No. Are you sure?
Am I mixing this up? Labyrinth. Jennifer Connelly.
Connelly.
Sarah Williams is the name of the character.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Okay,
All right. Jennifer Connelly.
It's been so long since I've seen that.
Plays Sarah
movie.
Williams.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Yeah, that's the duh. Right. So anyway, it's a really great film. It's an adventure. The sort of effects are amazing. The design and the costumes and the puppets.
Jim Henson.
Jim Henson's classic puppets. These ones are a little bit more colorful than maybe like the Sesame Street ones are, but very, very well done. A very well done movie. And David Bowie is amazing. And if you don't love David Bowie, you're just wrong.
Yeah, if you don't love David Bowie, you are doing it wrong.
You don't have it. You don't got it. I'm sorry. You've been voted off the island. That's the definition of a pan shot. You don't like David Bowie? I'm sorry.
That's a pan shot.
I'm sorry, Franco. You're going to be hung by the neck until dead.
First time.
First time. But yeah, no, classic film, very, very important, and I don't know, I love it, and I watched it with my girlfriend for the first time, well, I'd seen it before, but I mean, we watched it together first. No, she had seen it before too. Okay. We just watched it together for the first time. We both watched it at the same time for the first time, and I haven't seen it since I was a kid, so it was kind of a treat. I was a kid
either.
It was definitely a treat. I didn't really remember much of it. So it was kind of like, I'd always known it was important, and I always kind of had vague memories of like the images, but like I didn't even remember that I had seen it when we agreed to watch it. She was like, "Oh, have you seen Labyrinth?" And I'm like, "I don't think so. I know about it. I know like a lot about it, but I haven't like seen it."
And then you were like,
and then I was like, "Oh, some of this stuff
is
familiar."
Yeah.
But a lot of it, like it felt like I was watching it for the first time. So.
So Labyrinth. Go see it.
Go see it if you haven't already.
Or if you have and it's been long enough.
Yeah, go see it again, because it's one of those movies that's worth doing. It's a classic.
It's worth doing, man.
And I think it's the kind of classic that maybe your parents didn't like raise you on. Like I think it's niche enough that a lot of people who aren't into fantasy probably didn't watch it back in the day. And it's not like a Breakfast Club. It's not like the kind of movie where everybody's like nostalgic for. The kind of people who are nostalgic for Labyrinth are like.
Fantasy people or film people.
Yeah, like Adam Savage talks about Labyrinth every once in a while, if you're a fan of him from the Mythbusters. But special effects people are really into Labyrinth because it's a great special effects film. But yeah, it's a good watch. Go see it.
Hells yeah. So we were talking about this before we started recording.
Bandersnatch!
Yes, Black Mirror Bandersnatch. The Choose Your Own Adventure Netflix phenomenon. Directed by David Slade?
I don't know.
I think this is one where I remembered the name.
If it's not Wes Anderson, I'm not going to remember the director.
You're Wes Anderson, love. Yeah, I think that's the name.
I'm looking it up right now. Give me 1 second. David Slade.
Yeah, there we go. Not to be confused with David Spade. Very different David.
Yeah, very different David. Screenplay by Charlie Brooker.
Okay.
Yeah, if that
name sounds kind of familiar.
I don't know.
But
names.
Isn't he the creator of Black Mirror? I don't know.
Probably.
But But yeah, no. So yeah, Black Mirror Bandersnatch. Very interesting concept. It's like kind of the first of its kind, really. I mean, there's been obviously choosing an adventure has been a huge thing in literature for a long time. It's been really big in video games for a while now. With like Telltale and Quantic Dream making really big titles on that kind of concept, and other games just incorporating it at least a little bit.
But this isn't really a video game.
It's a movie. It's an interactive movie. I mean, it's a game. It really is kind of a game in a lot of ways, but it's not. It's somewhere in between. It's it's almost like its own medium, really.
Yeah, it kind of is, and it does kind of have allusions to both. I mean, it's about a video game in a way.
It's about a video game that's being adapted from literature.
Yeah, it's being from a choose your own adventure novel, no less. But it's all in the form of video, obviously, as the name kind of implies.
And this is going to be the first movie of our episode that we've both seen.
Well, sort of, because
Labyrinth. I mean,
well, yeah, but I mean, like, the thing about Bandersnatch is though that like I'm not sure that either of us technically finished it. I mean, like,
I got a lot of endings.
I got a lot of endings too. Well, and I just when I was looking up the director, the first thing that came up was an Esquire article that said there are some Bandersnatch endings you'll never find. Sorry, I don't know if that means that
you just have to like
they're really
do
deep
things so many times and exact types of. Well, I saw this one flowchart that I think IGN put out, and it was like somebody mapped out every possible ending or scenario pretty much the same way that he's mapping it out for the game,
right?
Where it's like just a tree.
Flowchart.
And so presumably that at least that person who made that thought they had every ending, but I guess not.
Yeah, I don't know. And it's not like a video game where you can go into the source code and like find out that information by force, I guess, because it's a stream service. So like the only way to find out all the endings is presumably to do every single.
And it's also
choice.
More accessible than a lot of video games, right? Because someone like my mom can like pull it up, and she doesn't have to be good at playing video games. She can just
she can just press the button
or no.
Right or left.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or wait for the timer to go out and see what happens.
Yeah. I didn't do that at all. I thought about doing that a couple times. I almost had the timer almost ran out. There was one decision we talked about earlier where it's like, did you have two choices, but they're both to like destroy the computer?
So you're just like, what?
And I was like, what? Which one do I do?
Yeah, and then it ran out. I will say I let the timer go on one choice. I think if the timer goes, it picks the left choice always. Funny story. I was in the process of unclogging a toilet, and I was only half watching Bandersnatch, and I didn't notice that questions came up. Yeah, you're just over here laughing. So I didn't notice that the choices came up for do you or don't you kill him.
Yeah,
and I let it run out, and I guess it didn't matter because. Some of those choices don't really matter.
If you're playing on a video game console like I did, the controller will vibrate.
Oh, really? No shit.
Yeah.
I played it on my phone for the most part, which is interesting because there was a little disclaimer like clip at the beginning that was like when you're watching it on your tablet or phone. Did you get something like that for a console?
Yeah, and it said the controller will vibrate. And
wow.
Then it just said press it like left or right, and then it was like, do you understand? And I clicked no just to see what it would do. And then it just started the movie anyway. So I was like, oh, I guess that's a good
hilarious.
Thing. I'm just kidding.
Oh my god, that's so funny. Well, I guess that's kind of a joke then, because if you click no, that means you understand. Like if you click no, you understand how it works because you clicked no.
Oh yeah, you're right. That's funny.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, I clicked yes just because I wanted it to start and I didn't want to risk watching the tutorial thing again. I thought it was really clever. We talked. You said we talked about this earlier, and we'll try not to make a whole episode about this. There are some really classic, like Black Mirror type things. It's very psychological. It's very it toys with your ideas of reality and perception and a lot of other similar concepts. But we both had some problems with it. I think you more so than me, but.
Yeah, I wasn't as fond of this movie as a lot of people seem to be, because like everybody that I've talked to up till you has been like, well, except for Christy, my fiance, who I watched it with or played it with, however you want to see it. She really hated it, but pretty much everyone else I've talked to has been like, I love it. It's the greatest thing ever. Oh my god, it's amazing. Like Bandersnatch, best thing on Netflix. Like I had all those people. Like I had a couple of friends who like were like, yo, Bandersnatch is way better than Bird Box, bro. And like, I haven't seen Bird Box.
I haven't
so
seen Bird
don't
Box
know,
either. We should probably watch Bird Box.
Yeah,
I don't know
maybe
what all
an
the hype's
episode.
about. It just looks like A Quiet Place to me. But
Yeah, I don't know.
anyway,
Sandra
I
Bullock's a good
digress.
actress. So,
Yeah, I
if
guess,
nothing
yeah.
else, there's that. But yeah, no. So I didn't hate it. I mean, there's a lot that I found to like about it, and I really liked a lot of the exploration of alternate realities and the way that they were talking about video games, and they were talking about Pac-Man, and then we know when these has the acid trip,
Program and control.
right? So what do you think PAC stands for? And and so then it's kind of like mind blowing, like when he's literally like blowing the character's mind because he's tripping.
They're both dropping on it. They both
Yeah.
dropped acid. They're tripping balls, and he's just like.
But then
Pac-Man tries to escape, but he can't. He just ends up right back where he started.
dies and he comes back. It doesn't bother him any.
Yeah.
And then one of them dies because then they're like, it doesn't matter. We're in an infinite stream of different realities, and so one of us is going to jump off of this balcony that's like several stories up, like maybe 10 stories up or something. Yeah. And they're like, not
is
that
it going to
many,
be you
really
or
high.
me? And then you get the choice. Is it going to be you
and
or him?
I did both choices, different times, and it happens. Whichever one you pick, that person does jump and die, or they don't because it's a dream, and it gets. And this is where my problems come in. It gets really convoluted, and it feels like it's complicated for the sake of being complicated. Which, like I said to you earlier, I know I keep alluding to a conversation that you guys didn't hear, but basically I'd said to Ben that like the movie seems to almost be aware of that, like, because it makes the joke like if you get one of the good endings, it's like the game's really well received, and he. It's like, oh, like, how did he do? I took a lot of like the endings out. I simplified it. I like took like these training paths out, and I just gave them the illusion of control instead of giving them all these choices.
And by good ending, he doesn't necessarily mean that the ending was like
it's not
positive
happy.
or
it's
happy.
good, and it's that the game was received well, because there's so many different endings. Where, like, the game
I would
was trash,
also argue,
the game was okay.
I would also argue that the endings where the game was received well are also endings in which there's the most that happens, and I think are the most interesting endings. But I can't say that for certain because there are a lot of endings that I haven't gotten.
I also got an ending where the game never even got released.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I've got that one too. I will say one of the things, just to like kind of maybe not contradict your opinion, but to like maybe another perspective to think about it. The book Bandersnatch that they've based the video game. All right, so I don't know if you guys have context for what I'm saying, but Bandersnatch, the story is about a sort of troubled youth who is designing video games in the 1980s, and he's designing a video game called Bandersnatch based on a book of the same title that's a choose your own adventure. We learn while playing Bandersnatch, or watching, whatever you want to call it, that the original author of the Bandersnatch book went crazy and chopped his wife's head off.
And then used her blood to paint all these symbols
on the wall. Yeah, which is a symbol that we've actually seen in previous Black Mirror episodes. If you noticed, it was in the Black Museum. It was also the face mask and of the I don't know if you remember the episode about the guy who was sent on the will release child pornography under your name or something if you don't like do all these things. Anyway, so basically. There are a lot of different endings, and I lost my train of thought. What happened?
You were just explaining what the story is about. You're saying it's a troubled youth in the 80s making this video game.
I was explaining that.
You find out that the author of the original book went crazy and killed his wife.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Thank you for you re-railed me. Basically,
it's one way to put it.
It's one way to put it. Anyway, yeah. So what I was saying was that Bandersnatch, the Choose Your Own Adventure book, Bandersnatch, was so convoluted that it drove the author crazy and made him chop his wife's head off. So to like that, according to the story in the game / movie, whatever you want to call it, that's like what happens to our character. He goes crazy because of how convoluted the Choose Your Own Adventure is that he's trying to make. The Choose Your Own Adventure that we're watching, which is confirmed to be a remake of the game that he was supposed to be making, is so convoluted.
Oh, yeah, because then you get that ending where it's like the daughter of the one
the other guy, the other coder,
like
she's remaking this game, and it's what we're playing. She's remaking the game that we're playing. So it is convoluted.
And then you can make her choose to destroy
their computer. Yeah. Which was pretty funny. But we're playing the well-received Bandersnatch. So assuming the cycle is the same, she probably went crazy and killed somebody. And now we're reading or playing the product of that. And you had made a comment that you didn't like how it started getting like ridiculous and convoluted and like extra.
Yeah,
But-
like the Netflix thing. It's funny.
And
Netflix thing is really funny at first.
I think the
until-
Netflix thing is an Easter egg. So
I understand, and I'm not gonna like hold that against like the whole movie, but like there's just one part where like it started to lose me. Is like when they turns into like Kill Bill in the freaking
yes, and I think
therapist's
it's
office.
it's clearly a Easter egg because it ends really quickly. You
Yeah.
click the Netflix icon, that's like the next thing that happens.
Oh, you toy with him for a minute because he's like, "What the fuck is Netflix?" And you're like,
Right.
and it's like explained it more.
You can
or-
try to explain Netflix
Yeah.
to him. Either way, you end up in that scene with the
Yeah.
therapist, and then you can like fight in a kung fu scene, and it's very cheesy. But like I think it was comic relief for the rest of this game, which is pretty fucking like
It's pretty bleak. It's pretty dark.
and it's pretty intense. And it's
Even when
pretty
you choose not to
psychological.
kill your dad, you do it anyway.
You do it anyway.
You smash his head
Smash
open
his
with
head
a glass
Ashtray.
and then cut his body into pieces.
Or bury it. You could bury it. You don't have
Even
to
when you cut it up, you still bury it.
No, because his head is sitting on his desk when
Oh,
you,
right.
Yeah. Because
I thought it was assumed that he. Oh no, because his whole body is like on the.
all yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
Well, yeah, dark movie.
dark experience. But I think that I was just making a point that maybe it's convoluted on purpose.
Well,
and-
that's what I mean. I think it's self-aware. Like
Yeah.
it makes that point. Like you're saying, like with the author went crazy, and he was the game.
the main character went crazy.
He went
and
crazy,
then
but then he also like when he like so then also some of the endings because I got several of those endings were like different versions of when the game came out,
Right.
and like when the game comes out and it's like oh they used all of the like all these it's super complicated, and the guy was like reviewing it was like yeah but it's like stupid and there's like it's one of the worst things I ever played. It's boring and all that.
Right.
And then like but like when he get the ending where he has simplified it
Yeah.
and he's taken away all of these different solutions and made it way less convoluted, they're like greatest game ever.
And yet,
You know.
and I was saying to you earlier, in a way, Bandersnatch did do that too. It's got all of the same convoluted endings, but it holds your hand to reach them. You get all of those endings in a linear fashion. There are endings that are locked until you complete other endings, and it gives you the option to go to the credits all the time. And if you don't go to the credits, it goes back and you get different endings. So if you play Bandersnatch continuously for a while, you will cycle through every single ending because that's how the game is set up. It's very linear in that regard.
So like I was saying to you earlier is that like all that is great, but then it doesn't ever feel satisfying. And
Yeah.
I think just at first it was like, oh, nothing really happens. But I think what it is that it never feels like your choices matter. And this is something that I think Christy was getting at because she really like, just hated it. I didn't hate it, but like she was saying what like the end of she's like, what was the point in all that? And like
Right.
and I started thinking about it, like even thinking about it now as you were saying that and we were talking about it earlier, that like it doesn't feel satisfying, I think, because like you're like, well, it doesn't really matter what choice I make because I
Right.
can just go back and make a different one later. And like, and even if I make the wrong choice, what's going to happen? It just resets me back to where I didn't make that choice. And like, and you do get consequences for your choice. Like, oh, because then if you make the wrong decision to join the video game company early on, when you come back, like that's what happened in my first playthrough. It like plays off these new things of like we've been here before and blah blah blah, but. None of your choices ever feel like they matter, and they never feel like you have really control.
But
It's
then
like,
again,
it's going to end how it ends, and there's different endings, and different like little scenarios, and you can go down the whole rabbit hole of like he goes crazy, and like what the symbols of like the author believed in, or he, you go into that PAX rabbit hole with you said like
Right.
the mind control stuff, but
TJ, then again, like it's no different than a video game or choose your own adventure book because ultimately they've given you the ability to complete every ending, and that's why it doesn't seem like your choices matter.
But when
because you
I
can go
play
back
a
and do
game
them.
like Beyond Two Souls,
Right.
or Detroit Become
or
Human,
Heavy Rain or
Heavy
any
Rain.
of those
I think
games.
Detroit Become Human is a really good one because there's a lot of no, I mean it's a really good example.
Oh, okay, 'cause there's a lot
this
of different
because there's so many
endings.
different endings. There's different characters. I felt in playing that like I was on this story path.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is that it kept going, and like I felt like, okay, I can go back and play this another time and get different scenarios and
Right.
have different things happen if I make different choices. But I felt like I was, instead of me just like my choices don't matter and I could just redo them, it didn't feel like that. It felt like I was creating my own story.
Well,
with
yeah.
this. What, like, Bandersnatch never felt like that to me. Bandersnatch felt like me going, like, browsing a menu of scenes.
Yeah, well, but I think that's
You know.
what that was an inherent issue with it being in the format that it was, in video format. In a choose your own adventure novel, you create all of that in your head, so the story is inherently a little bit more yours. I will say that in a choose your own adventure story and in Detroit Become Human, you can always go back and at any given point and make a different decision. Modern video games make it a little bit more difficult because they want you to complete a story in one go. But say you were reading a choose your own adventure novel, what it gives you a choice, and it says if you choose A, go to page whatever. You go to page whatever, you read the consequence. If you didn't like that consequence, you can go back and choose a different one. And that's really what Bandersnatch does in a lot of ways. And
it's truer to that. It's just, I think for me, like, that's just part of why I didn't like it.
Well, yeah.
It never felt like I was, like, shaping a story or creating my own version of a story. It felt more like I was just kind of like, I don't know.
But I think it wasn't really about you being the chooser of the story, because I think that was the big point of Bandersnatch. Like, I think it was more about you experiencing what the character in the experience is experiencing, and realizing that, like, who has control, what is control, and, like, am I in control or is someone in control of me? Because I think that's what it was. It was more about that message than it was about, having a video game experience where you, like, play your own story. Because, like, I saw it a lot more as if it was an episode of Black Mirror that I had to work to like unlock. Because that's how it seemed to me. It didn't seem like it was a story where I was like, oh, I'm going to make my own episode of Black Mirror. It was, this is an episode of Black Mirror in a bunch of segments, and I have to, follow each different path to uncover all of the different parts of the episode.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, I'm not trying to use that as like a criticism for like it being bad. It's like, that's just why I didn't personally like
that's
it
valid.
in a big way. Where, like, I think things that are objective are like just how convoluted it is. Like,
right.
There's those kind of problems.
And I think it is convoluted. And I think Black Mirror has always had a problem with writing in that regard. Like, I think, as much as a lot of people love Black Mirror, and I love Black Mirror, I think there have been a lot of
discussion
episodes
with the Star Trek episode,
right? And
I loved, and you didn't really.
I didn't really like, and I will say it's grown on me. I've thought about it a lot more since, and I think I'm a little bit more open to that episode than I was when I first watched it. I think I had some gut reactions that might not have been fair. And Jin Kim telling me that wasn't fair was kind of opening my eyes in that regard.
Yeah.
Jin Kim is a professor of ours, or Professor Kim. He doesn't really like it when you call him Jin Kim because that's weird.
Dr. Kim, actually.
Dr.
He has a
Kim.
doctorate.
He does have a doctorate, but he's my professor,
respect.
which is why I call him Professor Kim. He does not care, professor or doctor, but he is a doctor.
He teaches film genre classes, among other communications things.
Yeah, he's film criticism, communications theory, communications research, which is the methodology course. But
we took science fiction and fantasy films with him, and I also took horror movies with him.
Yeah. Long story short, we watched that episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah.
I was the only one in the class who didn't love it, and he was not happy about that. Especially, I think it kind of disappointed him because we usually have the same opinions on almost every film that we watch.
Well, he knows you love sci-fi.
Yeah.
That you at least like Black Mirror.
Well, and we like the same kind of sci-fi. Like, most of the stuff that I like is also stuff that he likes. And I remember I talked about Never Let Me Go in one of our book responses. So we had to talk about the films that we watched in class and that we had to watch on our own time, and we had to compare them to films that we had seen and other science fiction literature and stuff like that. And Never Let Me Go is a really, really wonderful example of really subtle science fiction. And it's a book, and it had a film adaptation. The book is much better. But I brought that up in one of my film responses, and he was like, "You've seen it? You liked it?" And I was like, "Yes, yeah, it's great." And he's like, "Oh, I'm so excited." It was a good time. Yeah. But yeah, so I think Black Mirror has had problems because I think originally it was pretty low budget. I don't know if anybody expected it to be as popular as it became. I remember when I watched season 1 of it, it was right when I started college, and I remember going to one of my professors like, "Have you seen Black Mirror?" And she was like, because she taught media and culture, which is like a 100 level media class, and she was like, "No, I don't even know what that is." And I was like, "You should watch it. You would love it." Because we always used to talk about like Twilight Zone and like science fiction movies and stuff. And I'm like, this is like, an anthology that's got like the Twilight Zone theme, but it's all about science fiction. And then all of a sudden, like by season 3, people like everybody knew Black Mirror.
Yeah.
But I think
it took off on streaming services in a big way.
Oh yeah,
people going back and binging it.
Absolutely, but I think the nature of the show being kind of low budget and kind of starting a little bit underground, there are some episodes that kind of fall flat, like really badly.
Like that really weird episode with that like little Terminator dog.
Oh, Metalhead?
Yeah.
I thought Metalhead was really interesting. I think of all of the episodes, that one was, of that season, I think that one was my favorite. I think
my favorite Black Mirror episode ever, and like it was I forget the name of it, but it's the one with Toby Kebbell and the eye cameras.
Oh, that one's good. That one's really I feel like that really is intense science fiction. Like that's I something about that is really it really speaks.
It's like cerebral.
Yeah, and I think that it feels like a lot more real than some of the other ones do, because some of them are kind of almost whimsical or far-fetched.
That's like, well, so the reason why I didn't really like care for Metalhead that much is because it was kind of just felt like this like horror thriller thing of like her trying to escape this robot in a lot of ways, where like,
well, yeah, that's what it was.
I know that's what it was, but like what I appreciate from my sci-fi is what we talked about again earlier before we were recording about like great sci-fi like makes comments on stuff that's going on today.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And like that episode was like, it's kind of like, oh, we don't have like
it was way more physical
eyeballs, but like we do have like old selfies or like nudes or whatever, from like people we've dated, and we're like, you can go back and relive that,
see every memory.
Yeah.
Whereas Metalhead was a lot more physical. It was very like, here's a survival story.
Yeah.
But I think that one had interesting cinematography, and I think that one, compared to some of the other episodes in that season, I thought was pretty good. I didn't like it was Archangel, I think was the second episode of that season, which was the one about the censoring iPads, the iPads that censored your kids what they could see and couldn't see.
Oh, yeah.
That felt like a convoluted episode plot wise. I mean, like the plot was simple, but it didn't feel reasonable to me.
The one where the people can choose if they want to go to that virtual afterlife is really interesting too.
Oh, that one was in the previous season.
Yeah,
that was
season 2.
Season 3, I think. Isn't because in season 4 the one with
it's definitely not season 4, but yeah, season 4 is the one with
the Black Museum. Yeah, so it's season 3, and that one's San Bernardino.
No, there's the one with the guy from Get Out that's really good too. 1,000 Merits or something.
Yeah,
like that.
30,000 Merits. That one is excellent.
Really, really
that was
good.
that was the one that got me sold on Black Mirror, and that's probably my favorite episode.
Daniel Kaluuya, that's that guy's name.
Yeah.
And there's another one I really, really like. The one where the woman, like her husband, like dies and then comes back, but he's different.
What? I'm sorry.
The one where the woman's husband dies and like.
Oh yeah, it's the artificial intelligence one where it's like you can have your loved ones back, but it's like it's the husband made from all of his like text messages and emails and stuff, and like the artificial intelligence just like assumed what he was like, and it wasn't quite the same. That was really like an uncanny valley, like the dangers of like trying to bring back the dead. That's a really old story told in a really new and refreshing way that's also like really relevant to like the current technology. I thought that was a really cleverly done episode. The episode that we mentioned earlier, San Junipero, is the one where they choose the afterlife.
Yes.
That actually won awards, if I remember correctly. That episode was done perfectly from start to finish.
Fascinating episode, and then it keeps like questioning of the audience, like, what would you do? What would you do?
Yeah,
would you die? Like, because like that woman's husband is like, I'm not going to put my consciousness in some virtual haven. I'm going to die and go the human way.
Be natural, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, so you have to think to yourself, like, would I just want to take my chances that there is just like there is an afterlife, or that there's just nothing, or do I want to go to a guaranteed afterlife?
Right. Right, and I think there's an episode of Black Mirror, and I think this one might be in season 4, but it might be in season 3. I do not remember. But there's the dating app one.
Oh, that was interactive.
Yeah.
Where you could follow along on your phone and like choose.
Oh, I didn't know you could. That was interactive. I didn't know.
Or
That
no, no,
happened.
you couldn't. No, you couldn't. No, no, it wasn't. I'm sorry, it wasn't interactive. But like, there was an app that like you could do a similar like thing.
Oh,
Like
okay.
you and your significant other had to like press the button at the same time or whatever, and it would tell you how long your relationship was going to
Yeah, yeah,
last.
that was what that episode was
Yeah,
about, and
yeah.
I remember thinking that was like,
But like, it wasn't interactive like you interacted with like Bandersnatch. But it was like
oh
you
yeah,
could
yeah,
like
you
put
could
yourself in those
in the
shoes.
shoes, yeah.
Yeah.
That was another one that I actually didn't like that one very much, but mostly because of the ending. I thought that was really interesting, except that it was all just like a program simulation or whatever. It was like, what are you meant to be together? Simulation thing. And that was one of the ones that kind of fell flat to me because there are some like that.
And Bandersnatch.
Bandersnatch I liked. I don't know. I thought
Yeah.
Bandersnatch. I wouldn't say it was the best Black Mirror episode or experience ever, but it wasn't the worst. I liked it better than the Christmas special that I don't really remember. I liked it a lot better than Black Museum. I did not like Black Museum. Some people loved Black Museum.
I actually didn't watch that one yet.
That
I
was
haven't
the
watched
last
all
episode of
the.
season
Yeah, I
4.
haven't watched all of that season.
It's
Yeah.
like an homage to like other Black Mirror episodes, but it's also got its own thing going on. It was like the Black Museum is like a roadside museum in the future where the curator is this weird guy who's collected all of these like gross Black Mirror technology like farces, and like I don't know, it was weird. It was interesting. It was like it's like a bunch of little short stories. So like the first one is about this doctor who found a uh way to feel other people's pain. It's like he was like he had an implant in his head that was given to him by like the tech department of his hospital, and he was like, oh, if I can feel my patient's pain, then I can know exactly what's wrong with them and I can cure all their diseases. And then like one day he experienced a like woman die, and then he like it like broke him and he became like addicted to pain. Like his wires got crossed and like pain became pleasure, and he became like a crazy like BDSM guy. And he would like beat his wife, and then she like left him because he was like getting off to like hurting her. And then
So he became Christian Grey.
yeah, basically he like went crazy, and then he was like, yeah, I guess like he ended up like letting a woman die so that he could feel like the pleasure from it. And then
Wow.
and then they like kicked him out of the hospital, and he like went crazy and like killed a homeless guy and then went to jail and like died in a coma, or like went into a pleasure coma because he like drilled through a homeless guy's head with a it was weird. It was weird. And like I didn't find it particularly like deep or anything. It was just one of those like it was very like guttural like body horror stuff that was just kind of like didn't really feel like the old Mirror that I love, which is it was witty and clever and posed interesting questions about technology and stuff. So
Yeah, well, that was a big ass tangent.
oh yeah, we were
But
talking about Bandersnatch, and they got on a huge digression about
we'll
Black
have to
Mirror
have
in
like
general.
a Black Mirror episode probably like down
Yeah,
the line. Even
if
though
you guys would like
we almost
that.
just had a truncated Black Mirror episode right there. It was
That's
probably 20
true.
minutes we just talked about it. Probably more than that.
That's probably true.
That's valid.
I bet we could probably wrap it up around here unless you've got some more stuff you want to talk about.
Those are all the movies that I saw, though I watched some TV shows as
Yeah,
well.
I watched some TV shows. Just we'll be really quick with TV shows. We'll make them real short. I watched the new Sabrina Netflix show. It was really interesting. It's set in the same universe as Riverdale, if I'm to understand that correctly, and it feels like Riverdale if Riverdale wasn't awful. Sabrina isn't great. It's like Riverdale meets Supernatural. I think that's kind of what it reminded me of. I thought it was kind of fun to watch. There was some interesting cinematography stuff going on. It almost, and this is like really weird, but it almost seems like they lens whacked some of the scenes where they like held the lens away from the camera body and then like focused by moving the lens. There's this weird like effect that you get when you're recording in that way. And that was kind of weird and interesting. And I think there's like a digital blur placed on all of the backgrounds, which was kind of weird, but it was interesting. It was different, and it was kind of like it evoked a feeling of mysticalness in a way, which I thought was interesting. I also watched the first few episodes of the new She-Ra, which was I've so far found pretty entertaining. I recommend it. And I think
Yeah, I've seen neither of those.
yeah, I think that's pretty much everything.
I finally finished watching HBO's The Leftovers, which is
Yeah.
a really fascinating show. I didn't watch the final season of it for a long time. I just got busy and whatever, and I finally like binged through the last season. That's a great show. I think I've talked to you about it before, but basically the premise is that like just randomly out of nowhere, 2% of the world's population just vanishes.
Yeah.
They're just gone. Like they're not like they don't die. Like their clothes, everything, it's just gone. They just vanish. And we're talking like babies out of their mother's wombs. We're talking like people riding their bike or whatever. Like they just disappear, and like nobody knows where they went. And like religion can't explain it. Science can't explain it.
Oh, buddy, it's the rapture.
So that's what it kind of hints at. But then like it plays with that, but it never. So like
I haven't seen it, by the way.
yeah, the religion, they're like it's the rapture, and like yeah, like we're what's been left behind because we're here to suffer because we're the shitty ones, and like they got to have peace and all that. And then in the end, you end up finding out that it's very different than what you were expecting.
Aliens.
No, it's not. It's nothing actually that's really obvious until you see it, and then you're like, oh, I should have figured that, but you don't. You really don't see it coming.
All right. Spoiler, guys. Spoiler time. TJ's going to tell me exactly what it is because I need to know.
You want me to tell you?
Yeah, I want you to
You
tell
gotta
me.
watch the show, man.
I'm
It's
not going to
so
have
good.
time. It's an HBO
It's only
series.
3 seasons.
Yeah, 3 seasons. That's like fucking 25
30
hours, 30
yeah.
hours. Yeah, I don't have time for that.
Okay, so spoiler, okay, because this show is amazing. It's like one of
All
the
right,
best
I'll
shows I've ever
probably
seen.
watch it, but not for a long time.
Okay, so what happens is, you end up finding out in the end that those people now exist in basically a parallel reality where 98% of the people vanished.
Oh my god, that's crazy.
Yeah, and so they're left in the end. And because what happens is there's this machine that's made, and this is the big part of the plot of the final season, is that there's this machine that's made, but it's really top secret, and it's from these researchers that were like kicked out of their universities for trying this shit. And basically, this woman who lost her whole family, like she was really rare because most people only lost like one person they knew or 2 people they knew. She lost her her husband and both of her kids, and so she's like having a really traumatic experience. And so she gets contacted by this organization, like really top secret. It's like catch this train and meet me at this bus station, and it's really underground. And they're like basically telling her there's this machine that like uses all this like radiation because we found these trace amounts of radiation where these people disappeared. We figured out that if we put you in this machine and we expose you to all this like radiation in this tank, we can send you to wherever they went. And she's like, fuck you, you're just incinerating people. And so she's like, I'm not going to do that. But then she ends up deciding she's going to do it because she's like, even if it kills me, I don't have to deal with being here anymore and suffering like this. So she does it. And then the last episode jumps ahead like 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
And the guy who's like the main character of the show, who she ended up falling in love with like toward the end of the first season, and she kind of became like the stepmom of his family for a while. He ends up showing up on her doorstep. She's been living in Australia for all the and he's just up on her doorstep, and he's like, wait, I don't understand. You crossed over, like you went in the machine, like didn't you either die or go where they went? Like, how are you back here? And why didn't you come find me for the last 20 years? I had no idea where you were. I thought you were there. I didn't and so she ends up saying to him, hey, so the machine worked. She's like, I showed up right where I was, but just the world looked different, but I was in the same location, and the machine wasn't there, but I appeared. And she goes, so it took me a long time because, as you can imagine, there's not a whole lot of resources in this world.
There's a lot of
2%
of the population.
She goes, but eventually, she says, I was there for a very, very long time. She doesn't disclose the time frame, but she's like, long time. It took me to find my home. She says, and when I got back to it, I was outside of the door in the bushes, and I watched, and I saw my kids who were no longer in elementary school. They're now teenagers. Because this is like 7 years later, by the time of the 3rd season. She goes, and my husband, and there was a new woman, and they embraced her, and he was kissing her, and I realized they were the lucky ones. They were happy, and because they no longer had me, and and so she said she spent a lot of time in this world, but then she remembered the researchers had told her that the guy who created the machine was one of the first people to use it.
Okay.
So she spent
him.
another long periods of time to find him, convinced him to build another machine that then sent her back. But by this point, so many years had passed that she just said, fuck it, and was going to live out the rest of her days in Australia, being like a Dove salesman or whatever.
Right.
So she explains, she's like, yeah, I realized that really they were the lucky ones.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a great show. The acting is
have to watch it
incredible.
then.
Yeah, it's some of the best acting I've ever seen.
All right, you've sold
in a
me. It's
show.
another show I'll watch eventually.
Eventually, yeah.
Eventually. I mean, like, I'm a
Yeah.
busy person. I don't always have time to watch shows, but
So that show's great. I also watched Star Trek Discovery, which is pretty good. I think it's the best Star Trek show since The Next Generation. I
Okay.
think it's better than all these like spin-offs they've had. I know you're not as big a Star Trek fan as I am, but yeah, I like it as a big
I don't
Star
dislike
Trek
Star
fan.
Trek. I just never got
No,
into
yeah,
it.
but like you're not a huge fan like the way
Yeah.
you are with like Star Wars.
Yes, I'm a much bigger fan of Star Wars.
But what's even better than Star Trek Discovery
Yeah.
is the Orville.
yeah, you said that.
Is Seth MacFarlane's The Orville, which I
No.
also watched over the break because I'd already watched season 1, which aired like
Yeah.
over a year ago, but season 2 just debuted, and I've been following along with that. That show's awesome. It captures the same kind of spirit as The Next Generation, very similar like visual aesthetic, but it has a Seth MacFarlane's brand of humor.
I've never liked Seth MacFarlane's brand of humor.
Oh, I know. You've been very vocal about that.
yeah, but I want to try the Orville because you've talked it up to me. I want to give it a shot. It seems like it's
funny.
could really
It's
be
really good.
Could really be good. And I know that Adam Savage, who's like my idol, has done work on the Orville. So just for that alone, I'll
It's
give it a
good.
try.
It's classic Trek, even though it's not actually Trek. It's classic Trek, and it does this way better than honestly Discovery does, where it does that sci-fi thing we just mentioned earlier, where it uses like sci-fi, like crazy outlandish premises to talk about real issues. Like
Right.
I think I told you about the one episode where there's this one civilization where they produce asexually, they're all males, and they always just create males.
Right.
And then a female is born, and they decide, we don't want a weak female in our culture because it only happens once every 100 years or so. And they try to get a sex change, and the captain is like, you can't do a sex change on a baby, and then it talks about these gender issues and stuff. And then there's one episode that's in the newest season that's really great. Where there's this futuristic gaming simulation you can do where it's like they go into this room that's like a simulator room, and it's like you're in a virtual reality space, like basically playing video games, but it's like real. This one guy who's like one of the higher ups in command, he goes into the room, like he visits it regularly, and what he's actually doing is he's like going in there and watching porn, and he's like having VR sex, and then he's like not having sex with his husband who's on the ship, and they're trying to raise their kid who was sex changed in the last season, and the husband wants a divorce. Well, in their culture, they kill their spouse when they want a divorce, and that's acceptable, and so they're going to throw them in the brig, and they're like, no, don't do it, that's our culture. And then they end up going to couples counseling, and then it's this whole becomes this whole thing talking about porn addiction and
Right.
relationships and stuff, and so it's just these grand sci-fi premises. There's one that's really fascinating from season 1. There's one more. I'll explain one more episode. I won't spoil it. Basically, it's there's this premise where they crash land on this planet that's it's almost identical to Earth, except it
Right.
exists in this system of upvotes and downvotes. And whenever you people have these little badges on their chest with an up arrow and a down arrow, just like on Reddit. And if people say you held the door open for someone, they'll be like, give you an upvote. Or if you were rude in traffic, someone will give you a downvote. Or
It's ripped from an episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, exactly. It was that kind of thing though, but it's a lot more humorous, obviously.
Right.
But basically, one of the members of the Orville gets he does something that gets filmed and goes viral, and he gets 10,000 downvotes, and then once you get a certain amount, they execute you.
Oh my god.
And so then he has to figure out how to try to get back out of that. So he has to go on this campaign of getting his public image back in shape
Right.
before he gets executed.
How could you live in a society where your downvote could contribute to somebody getting executed.
It's just the planet that they live on.
Yeah, I know. That's just wild.
To
wild stuff.
them, and they're like shocked by these people who are from outer space. Like they have to like cover up their ears and stuff like that. Because to them, they don't know. They're just basically like an alternate version of Earth.
Right.
They're almost identical. Like to them, it's like perfectly normal. They're like, yeah, upvotes and downvotes, bro. That's the law of the land.
Yep.
But it's fascinating because it touches on like Reddit culture and things like that. Viral culture, and So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll check it out at some point. But I think we should probably call it there for the episode. So thank you for coming along with us again on this episode of Your Boom is in the Shot.
Yes, and if you have any comments or anything you want to say to us, or if you like the show, if you hate the show, any suggestions,
especially if you hate the show, please tell us. We want to know.
Please.
Your Boom is in the Shot at gmail.com.
Or comment on the YouTube video. If you email us though, we will shout you out.
We will probably almost certainly respond. If you don't want us to shout you out, let us know.
Yeah, and we'll totally respond. We'll respond to everything. Whatever.
Yeah, I'm talking to you, Eric.
Like, comment, and subscribe, Eric.
He already likes and comments, well, I don't know if he comments, but he subscribes.
Good.
So, all right. Thank you very much, and good night.
Peace. Yeah. Killed it. Dang.